I turned around to enjoy the view and watched my partner walking up the footpath. And as I watched, I noticed someone behind her. I was surprised at first, as we'd been the only people at the boundary stone.
I gotta go potty.
Hey everyone, it's another Sunday. I'm with you. We are here to just chill tonight and relax, okay? Now, I hope you're having a great week. And if you're not, don't worry, because you've come to the right place. I have prepared a little something tonight for you to talk about Eyam, which is the plague village. Now, as you remember from last week, if you've listened to last week's episode, you'll know that I told some stories, some ghost stories from around Eyam, which were quite eerie actually. And I found another one on Reddit, which I'm going to read to you at the end of this podcast. Now, I thought I'd just tell you a little bit about the history of Eyam tonight. It's a village in Derbyshire in the UK. If you haven't heard of it before, it's just packed full of history. Very dark, really sad history, actually. But it is somewhere that I'd like to visit. Now, just a little bit of admin, guys. If you haven't already, please can I ask you a favour? Please can you hit the follow button, the subscribe button, hit the bell so you're notified of when all of my podcasts go live, because it really helps out my page. I am starting to get into America, which is crazy to me. And the reason why that's so good is because I'm receiving ghost stories from all over the world now. And you're really helping me push my channel out there. So thank you so much. Now, I also do have the TDC Club, which is on Patreon. It's £4 a month if you want to join. You get episodes a week early. I'm going to be posting loads of different things on there, just updates about what I'm doing to keep you guys in the loop. Now, there is a free version on there. It's absolutely fine if you don't want to pay. You don't have to. I'm not here to like rip you off, but I would like to also make this more of a steady income, more of a job, because I just honestly really get so much value in talking to you lot about different spooky places. If you do look at Patreon on the app, it will try and charge you £6.49. I looked the other day and I was like, why is this trying to rob people when I've only set it at £4? It turns out that Apple add more money on. Yeah, they're robbing bastards. It's not me. Okay, so go on your browser, sign up, and then sign in on your Apple app. It should work that way, and you won't be charged more. There's ways to get around it. We know, don't we? So yeah, follow, hit the bell, subscribe to, or the TDC Club if that's a bit of you and you want some more content from me. I would love to see you over there. I think it's just really important in this day and age that we have somewhere to go and just calm down and listen, because the world is just wild right now. And I have a few podcasts that I go to just to shut my mind off. So that's why I always say put your brain in a bowl, because it is just, we need to do that, don't we, sometimes? Anyway, I'm waffling. I have prepared an episode for you tonight. And I'm just going to read it to you. So you just relax, you chill. You're in safe hands here. And then we're going to tell the ghost story at the end. I'm not the best at reading from the screen, so just bear with me. I did actually create this earlier for you. And I did find some little links online to research all of this. So I will put them in the description just to, give credit to those lovely people who've done hard work. There's not that many. And there are some images of Eyam and some of the stories that I'm going to tell you, so you can kind of get an idea of what it looks like. Let's get into tonight's episode. Okay, there are some places where history feels distant, places where stories seem to linger in the streets, fields, and villages long after the people have gone. Today we are visiting one of those places, a small village in Derbyshire, Peak District, called Eyam. If you saw Eyam today, you might think it looks like the perfect English countryside village. Stone cottages built from pale grey limestone, narrowing winding lanes and rolling green hills stretching out in every direction. Sheep grazing quietly in the surrounding fields. It's peaceful, almost timeless. But more than 3 centuries ago, this quiet little village became the setting for one of the most extraordinary acts of sacrifice in British history. Because in 1665, a deadly disease arrived here, and the people of Eyam made a decision that historians still struggle with today. They chose to stay. They chose to seal themselves inside the village. No one would ever leave. no one would enter. They knew the plague was spreading, but they believed that by staying, they could stop the disease from spreading beyond the village. By the time it was over, 260 people had died. The story begins with something deceptively ordinary, a delivery. In 1665, a bale of cloth was sent from London to a tailor living in Eyam. London at the time was suffering a devastating outbreak of plague. Inside the bale of cloth were fleas, and those fleas carried the disease. A tailor's assistant named George Vickers opened the package and hung the cloth near the hearth to dry. I'm not sure what a hearth is. I need to look at what that is. Maybe I should have researched that a bit more. Sorry, guys. Actually, let me have a look. Hearth. We're going to have a look. A hearth is the floor of a fireplace or the stone brick area directly in front of it. Well, we have all learned something here, haven't we? Don't say I don't teach you anything, okay? That makes total sense now. In doing so, he unknowingly stirred the infected fleas into the air, and within days he became seriously ill. On the 7th of September 1665, George Vickers died in terrible agony. He became the first victim of the plague in Eyam, but he would not be the last. Now, really interestingly, I live in Weymouth in Dorset, and this is basically where the plague originated. The plague came off the fleas on the rats on the boats, and yeah, I don't know if I should be proud to say that, but it originated in Weymouth, and unfortunately, the people of Weymouth did not sacrifice themselves as willingly as the people of Eyam. So maybe we should have a long, hard look at ourselves here. To be fair, I've only been here, but I've been here like 20 odd years now, but I wasn't born here, okay? So I'm not getting involved with that. You know, I wasn't even from that time. I don't even know what I'm talking about. Now, over the following months, the disease spread rapidly through the village. Between September and December of that year, 42 villagers had died. People began to panic. Families considered fleeing. Leaving might save their lives, but leaving would also spread the disease into nearby towns, places like Sheffield and Bakewell. And that is when the village rector, William Mompesson, if I've said that right, made a proposal that would define Eyam's place in history. He suggested that the village should quarantine itself completely. No one should leave. No one should re-enter. It was an extraordinary request. And there was another problem. Many villagers did not trust him. Mompesson had replaced the previous rector, Thomas Stanley, who had been removed after refusing to follow the religious reforms introduced after the restoration of the monarchy. Stanley was respected. Mompesson was not. Realizing that he could not persuade the villagers alone, Mompesson reached out to Stanley. Stanley was living on the edge of the village after being forced out of the rectory. The two men met, and together they presented the plan to the villagers. After long debate and hesitation, the villagers agreed. Now, on the 24th of June 1666, Eyam officially sealed its borders. From that moment on, the village became a closed community. To survive, the villagers relied on help from surrounding communities. Food supplies were left outside the village boundary. And one of the most famous places where this happened still exists today. It is known as the Boundary Stone. Visitors can still walk there. If you follow the footpath out of the village and across the field, you eventually reach a large boulder. If you look closely, you will see small coin-sized holes carved into the rock. During the plague, these holes were filled with vinegar. People at the time believed vinegar could disinfect money. Villagers would collect the food at the stone and leave payment in the vinegar-filled holes. It's fair enough, isn't it? Even today, locals describe the walk out to the Boundary Stone as beautiful but deeply sad, because when you stand there and look across the hills, it is easy to imagine villagers making that same journey centuries ago, carrying food back to their families, not knowing who might fall ill next. That's really sad, isn't it? What a harrowing experience. I would really like to go and visit Eyam. And just a side note, if you guys live somewhere where you just know that there's an iconic place that is haunted, but I think maybe it's not so well known to everyone. Sometimes there are really well-known places and other times they're just not. And those are the places that I really want to visit because they haven't, had much exposure, or maybe they just, they're quiet and they just want to be respected, and I can do that too. I just kind of want to really travel around the UK this year. I know I've banged on about it in my other podcast episodes, but if you know of somewhere that's really cool, let me know in the comments and I will research it. And hopefully I can get out to some of these places and just experience them firsthand. That's what I want to do. Now, the worst period came in August 1666. That summer was unusually hot. The heat made the fleas carrying the plague even more active. Deaths increased dramatically. And at the peak of the outbreak, 5 or 6 villagers were dying every single day. Entire families were wiped out. In total, 260 people from 76 families died. Historians estimate the population of Eyam before the plague may have been somewhere around 350 to 800 people. So despite the suffering, very few people broke the quarantine. They stayed and they saw it through. Respect to these people. They're absolutely hardcore. Because you know that you're kind of just sacrificing yourself, don't you, in that small area, that small village. There's not really getting any away from anyone, is there? They obviously had this kind of thought that the vinegar was going to help them disinfect the coins, and they're still passing the food, the exchange of whatever the food's carried in, aren't they, back and forth over the border. So there is ultimately always going to be risk, and they wouldn't have known then, would they, that disease kind of stays on things for 12 hours. That's my understanding of it anyway. After 12 hours the bacteria dies, but I don't know, but I've heard, that's what I've heard. So they really must have been scared for their lives, and it must have just been so harrowing and daunting for them. But there was a lady there who I want to speak about, and her name was Elizabeth Hancock, and she's really famous in this town. Now, one of the most heartbreaking stories from Eyam involves a woman named Elizabeth Hancock, as I've just said. In August 1666, the plague struck her household, and within 8 days, she lost her husband and 6 of her children. Because the village was isolated, no one could come and help her bury them, which is just awful. Elizabeth had to drag their bodies to a field near the family farm and dig their graves herself. Some accounts suggest she tied cloth round their feet so she could drag them to the burial site. People from the nearby village of Stony Middleton watched from across the valley, but they were too afraid to cross into the infected village. Those graves still exist today. They are known as the Riley graves, and standing there today, the quiet field carries the memory of one of the most heartbreaking moments in the history of Eyam. Can you imagine what this mother must have felt like, burying her husband and her 6 children? And what fascinates me most is that she was totally immune to this. How has everyone caught it and died around her, yet she survived? And she did survive. She survived, and I think she even left the place. Like, she buried her family and she left. The plague was horrific. People had like big infected pus, I don't even know what to call them, like sacs under their arms, and like the pain of it all, and just the suffering. And what is wild is that obviously today it just wouldn't have happened. And it's just awful, isn't it, to think of people suffering like that? Like, just, back in the 70s, 80s, people dying of HIV, and like now it can be helped. It's just wild to think how quickly we kind of come on medically. All these harrowing stories still happened and we couldn't do anything about it. But there was another villager as well called Marshall Howe, and he became responsible for burying many of the victims as the outbreak worsened. He had survived the plague after being infected early. I didn't even know people were surviving it. In my mind, people are just dying straight up, so that's amazing. He believed that he couldn't catch the disease twice, so he helped bury the dead. And some stories say he even took belongings from the victims as payment for his work. Tragically, his own family later died of the plague, and it is possible the infection spread through items he had taken from his victims. Now, I think that, I don't know, I feel a bit bad saying this because the guy had survived a horrific plague. But why do you have to take payment? These people have already paid with their lives. They're dead. Like, I know it's a hard time, each their own, but I feel like that was a bit of karma there, You're stealing, aren't you, really? You're not taking this payment, you're stealing. Now, there was also Catherine Mompesson, the rector's wife. who also remained in the village during the outbreak, and she helped care for the sick. Despite already being poor in health, on the 22nd of August 1666, she went for a walk with her husband in the nearby hills. She commented on the sweet smell in the air that day. She died the following morning. She was only 27 years old, and her tomb still stands in the churchyard of St. Lawrence's Church. I have heard that. It's like people say if you can smell toast, you're having a stroke. All right. If you could smell like the sweetness in the air, that's how they knew that you had the plague. It's not great, is it? Bless her heart. 27 years old is just no age, is it? And to go and help people when you're already in poor health and you know that you're probably going to die, like what a sacrifice that is too. Now, there is actually ghost stories around Eyam, as I said. This isn't one that I'm going to tell you. This is just an overall kind of summary of what it is, but I will read that story to you in a minute, the ghost story to you. I think you're going to like it. Now, this says, with so many deaths, it's perhaps not surprising that Eyam has developed many ghost stories over the centuries. One unusual tale describes a phantom cyclist in Eyam Dale, and several people have reported hearing the swish of the bicycle tyres racing down the steep road, sometimes even the ringing of the bicycle bell. That's pretty cool. But when they look, the road is completely empty. Another story describes a cyclist climbing the hill during heavy rain. He watched another cyclist glide past him effortlessly. The strange thing was that the rider who passed him was completely dry despite the heavy rain. There are other stories too. The lady in the blue smock, I hope I've said that right, has been seen in the cottage where the plague outbreak first began. I need to know what smock means. If you guys don't know, if you guys know, I'm sorry, okay. I don't know what it is. A smock is a loose, protective overgarment traditionally worn by rural workers, painters, or as protective workwear. That makes sense. We know what it is now. So she is said to appear in the bedroom watching sleeping occupants before slowly fading away. That's freaky. At Mompesson's well, where villagers once collected supplies during the quarantine, the ghost of a small boy is said to be standing and waiting. Bless his little heart. I don't like that. Like, I just think these ghosts should be able to move on, but maybe they, just don't know they've passed away, or they're just stuck there, or maybe it's a memory, who knows. But near the Riley graves, a blue lady has been seen tending the graves. Now, if you remember, from our ghost story last week, there was a girl who saw the lady in a blue dress, which is really interesting because she's actually known in this place and she's been seen a lot. And the Miners Arms pub is said to be the most haunted building in the village. We know where we're going when we go. A former landlady who died after being thrown down the stairs is said to wander the building wearing an old-fashioned bonnet and cape. Bless her heart. How the hell this is a murder inquiry now, not just a ghost story. This is a murder inquiry. If anyone knows any more information about that, please do let me know, because I obviously haven't gone massively in depth into all of these things. Guests have reported hearing running footsteps up the stairs and strange disturbances in the rooms. She's causing absolute havoc, and I'm here for it, this woman. Now, I went on Reddit, and there's a story here from someone called Gloomwood. So complete credit to this person. I haven't actually read this properly. I've just skimmed read it. Okay, so let's read it together. Now, this person says, I've had a few spooky encounters in my life, but this is the most recent and the one that still puzzles and spooks me to this day. That is an opening that I love. Okay, my partner and I were on holiday in Derbyshire and decided to spend the day in Eyam. If you've never heard of Eyam, it's also known as the Plague Village because of its important ties to when the plague hit London in 1665. If it hadn't have been for the people of Eyam and their sacrifice, it could have been much more widespread than it was across England. Absolutely right to acknowledge that. Their sacrifice was amazing. Now, it was the middle of July, and my partner and I had been around the village reading the information about the cottages and the story of the residents. The sun was blazing hot in the clear blue sky, but even this bright and perfect weather didn't chase away the odd feeling of the place. It was the middle of the week, so it was extremely quiet, but it felt as though there were a host of residents watching us that we couldn't see. After visiting the graveyard at the church, which had been pretty central to the happenings in Eyam during the plague, we decided we wanted to see the boundary stone. This was a walk outside the village and was the place where supplies were left for the residents, where they isolated themselves from neighbouring villages to prevent the spread of the plague once it had taken hold of Eyam. The walk itself is beautiful. There were narrow, worn footpaths through open fields which had a great vantage point over the surrounding Derbyshire countryside. It sounds idyllic. After a bit of a walk, we reached a boundary stone and sat for a while, reading the information board and taking in the view. It felt like a very poignant place. We could almost feel the remnants of the people reaching the large rock hundreds of years ago. After a while, I suggested we started to walk back. It was getting to the hottest part of the day and there was no shade around. On the way there, we chatted away about the stories we'd read, about the people of Eyam who'd walked those footpaths, especially one woman in particular who'd been the main person doing these trips, as she'd not been affected by the disease. But on the way back, we were in a thoughtful silence, obviously moved by this place. As we walked back, I ended up a fair way ahead of my partner on the footpath. As I reached the top of the field, where the gate back to the village stood, I stopped and had a rest in the first bit of shade whilst I waited for my partner to catch up. I turned around to enjoy the view and watched my partner walking up the footpath, and as I watched, I noticed someone behind her. I was surprised at first, as we'd been the only people at the boundary stone, and there wasn't any other footpaths around, but I assumed she could have come from the other direction of the stone. The odd thing was I could see part of the woman behind my partner. It was as if the woman was walking just behind her, and from my perspective, could just see around half of the woman as they both walked at the same pace. I looked around a bit, then back at my partner and the woman, then around again as I waited. Eventually, my partner reached me at the gate and passed me. Only she passed me. There was no one behind her. I stood shocked and confused, looking around. My partner looked back at me, not understanding why I wasn't following, and I just started asking her where the woman went. Obviously, she wasn't aware of anyone following her, but the odd thing was the whole time she was walking back, she was thinking deeply about a lady we'd read about who'd lived in the village at the time and had to make those trips regularly to collect bread and other supplies. My partner thinks she made a connection to this woman's spirit and they felt connected as she walked back in her footsteps. And that's what I was able to see. It still really throws me to this day and makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up. What an amazing story. And I find this when I go to places like this, like you kind of do find yourself deeply reflecting and connecting to the history, especially if it has got that somber feel to it. And this place must just ooze that from every single location, because imagine the pain and suffering that went on there. You know, it's just hard to fathom, isn't it? But connecting to a spirit like this, this person's partner must have been really empathetic, and that spirit must have been really drawn to that empathy to actually be seen and understood for how difficult that journey must have been. That's my take on it anyway. They must have just been really grateful that this person is actually understanding that pain and suffering, you know. I guess it was probably a nice walk to go and get this stuff away from the village and that, because it sounds beautiful, but the reality of the harrowing situation where you know that you could possibly die in a few days, I think that's probably not the best part, is it? Now, I couldn't find any other ghost stories, which was sad, but after hearing that story, there are three possible explanations, I think. So the first one is a psychological explanation. So places like Eyam carry enormous emotional weight. And when you walk through the village and read the plaques on the cottages describing the entire families who died, it is impossible not to feel the history of the place. And sometimes our mind interpret the shadows, the distance, or movement in ways that create experiences that feel extraordinary. The second explanation is environmental. So the open fields of Eyam can create unusual visual perspectives. Light, distance, and terrain can distort what we see. It is possible that what seemed like a figure on the path was simply an illusion created by perspective. And then there is the third explanation, the one people find most intriguing. Places where intense events happen sometimes seem to hold on to those moments. not exactly ghosts, but something like an historical echo, a moment replaying itself. And if someone walks the path centuries later, perhaps they sometimes glimpse that echo. Whatever the explanation may be, Eyam remains one of the most extraordinary villages in British history, a place where an entire community chose sacrifice, a place where courage and tragedy exist side by side. And when you walk through Eyam today, you are not just walking through the village, you are walking through the memories of the people who live there. And sometimes those memories feel very close indeed. I hope that you love this episode. I will put the pictures up for you to see of the Riley graves. It's really beautiful that they are still being honoured today. People seem to respect the area, and considering it's from 1665, they're in pretty good nick. So I'll post that for you to see on this. Well, I'll put it up on this video for you to see, and also, yeah, just a few pictures from the village so you can have a little look at it, because it's a really beautiful place. Definitely go in there. Definitely go in there. Anyway, if you've got somewhere for me to go, let me know in the comments. If you want me to talk about somewhere in particular, drop a comment as well and we can have a little chat. If you've got a ghost story, a creepy story or anything like that, or your own story from Eyam, please email me, thedarklingchronicles25@gmail.com. Everything you need is in the description, okay? Go check out the TDC Club, and I will be back next week with another episode for you. I'll try and make it interesting, all right? Today's been nice and chill. I've really enjoyed learning about Eyam actually, and just doing a little bit of research on it. But yeah, until next time, guys, take care of yourselves. Have a great week, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.